Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you. Peace out to the rest of you. I'm going to skip the rest of the introduction, gentlemen. I want to get right to this. This is what's going on with regards to colorism and the gender war. I titled it as I did because illegitimate colorism complaints are a weapon of this gender war. Now, legit colorism complaints may or may not be, but illegitimate colorism complaints are in fact a weapon of war in this gender war. These weapons of war, unfortunately, can be very effective if you don't know that they're weapons of war. And I'll tell you how, or what I mean. As one example, one of the illegitimate points that I'm not going to sit up and say the colorism crybabies, i.e. I am Eloho, as an example, not so much something that she's been saying, although it does work like this too. See, let me clear up first off that when I talk about illegitimate complaints, I'm talking about no matter who makes them, no matter the shade of the lady making them. That's first thing. So you being blamed as an adult for a childish level of colorism that you probably have not had since you were age 14, gentlemen, that's an illegitimate colorism complaint used as a weapon of war. It is used as a weapon of war because, in a nutshell, that is a stepping stone. Because although there is nothing wrong with being abundantly melanated in a man or a woman, that's going to be used as a stepping stone to push you into whatever it is, not only whatever you don't prefer, but whatever they think you don't prefer. So they think you don't prefer abundant melanin counts in women. Therefore, what they'll do is they'll try to push you towards that. Even though many times you may be neutral about actual shade, they don't know that, or they know and they don't care. So they're going to try to push. But then after that, what's next? Then it's going to be texturism and featureism. And they're going to say, no, you got to go for whatever it is you don't like. And they're assuming that what you as an individual man likes is the same thing that gets promoted in Hollywood. This is one of the weapons of war in the illegitimate colorism complaint. Whether it is a DS woman or an LS woman making the complaint, let me tell you why Hollywood is always that. Number one, Hollywood is different from the rest of Los Angeles. Don't believe me? Ask Fuller Sports, ask BGS Ibmore. They live in the LA area. Secondly, Los Angeles is different from the rest of California. Thirdly, we know California is different from the rest of the country. So you take the most fictitious, least realistic environment, which is Hollywood, and then they both start arguing with each other over representation in this fictitious, unrealistic environment that is mostly for the purposes of entertainment. And then they want to argue and use these points to say that you, the black man, be you LS or DS or in the middle, are just colorist demons. So when casting directors make these decisions, regardless of who and what the casting directors are, you get blamed for it because then they say, well, you wouldn't buy the movies in the same amount if she had been cast by an actress if this character had been cast or played by an actress with a higher melanin count. That's what you're told. You're told this. And granted, there are legitimate complaints that some sides have, i.e., those like I am Eloho will sit up and say that LS women get all the roles, they get all the opportunities, and they got privilege. And the funny thing is, a lot of LS people think they got privilege that they don't have. Sydney McLaughlin has had to deal with this, the Olympian. She's had to deal with this. The lady that came in second place to her congratulated her. She didn't trip, but yet she has to see on social media that she's being told that the reason she's broken the records and getting all that she's getting is because of her shape. No, she had to train. She had to run faster than somebody else or jump higher or jump further than somebody else in order to win, just like anyone else did. That's what happened. On the flip side, you've got LS women sitting up and saying, which actually is a valid counter argument, which is that there have been historical figures in real life that were depicted by actors who had a higher melanin count. Malcolm has, he was played by Denzel, as an example. Will Smith played Muhammad Ali. Both of them may be LS, but Muhammad Ali was noticeably yellower, if you will, than Will Smith. That's the other thing. So I want you all to factor in that you're going to hear all sorts of complaints, legit and illegitimate. But what they're doing, gentlemen, is they're arguing about representation in Hollywood. And then turning around and blaming you for what casting directors have decided, and the casting directors probably ain't even us. That's the first thing. Next, they're going to hold up, again, coming out of Hollywood, although they're not making movies, they're going to hold up another celebrity couple, which is Steph and Ayesha Curry, as some sort of model. And here's the thing. See, we already know that Steph had to pursue Ayesha. He failed. She didn't want him until she could make her acting career blow up. But she saw that he was going to be sought after by NBA teams to sign contracts when he was in college. So when she saw that he was going to go somewhere and she wasn't, what did she do? She finally relented. Now, see, they want to sit up and say, well, see, this is an example of an LS couple that has been good and successful. That's because he's got money. And they're raising kids. And see, if we all did this, we could have an LS community. And I want you to keep this in mind, because they're largely going to use this to say to you LS men that you should be pursuing them. Notice they don't say that they should be choosing you to screw you and have your chillins and submitting to you, preferably in a marriage. They don't say this. They don't say that they should be doing these things in or without a marriage license. They don't say either of these things. That's the thing about it. They don't mention what they should be doing for you. Now, there have been some that have come in my comment section. Shout out to Just B. She actually said, no, I'm okay with submitting. She has said this. She's also, I think she's quite young. She was not even born in the 80s. So a lot of this stuff is, while unfair to her, it's an environment that she inherited. The fact remains that while she is an exception, she still says that despite the fact that she's an exception, you should be willing, you LS men should be willing to walk up to her and start conversations to find out that she's an exception. The problem is exceptions are so rare that you cannot bank on meeting them. So if you see who might be an exception, the fact that what you're looking for is an exception means that the chances are so slim, you might as well not walk up and try to find out. That's why people never flock to somewhere because there might be gold. They flock to somewhere because gold has been discovered. No gold rush was ever based on someone saying there may be gold because the gravity here is a little bit stronger than in other places. Nobody ever did that. Someone had to find gold in order for others to rush over there thinking they were going to get some. That's what wound up happening. Because there are rules and there are exceptions. We men have to live with rules, and these ladies are sitting up and expecting the few exceptional men they pick to be examples and templates for the rest of the men. And that's not possible. And unfortunately, a lot of the men who are exceptional and exceptionally often chosen tend to think the same way. Well, because it happened to me, it can happen to you. You can just alpha your way through it. It's not really that difficult. No, it is. That is regardless of shade, even regardless of race and culture. This tends to happen. But you see, the point is Ayesha and Steph are held up as some sort of model for you. And the thing is, I'm going to tell you why you already know why they're a bad example to be held up in front of us as. Number one, he had to pursue her too further muck and much. Number two, what did he get for it? Disrespected. Number three, not only did she get disrespected, but her own mother-in-law didn't check her that we know of. Notice I say that we know of. Maybe Sonya Curry checked her, say, hey, look, that's my son you're talking about. Maybe she didn't. I don't know. But the fact that Ayesha could say this publicly at that Red Table Talk 2 years ago, and her mother-in-law sat right next to her, and we didn't hear about her being checked publicly, means that one was allowed to slide publicly and the other one we don't even know about. That's what that means. So as an LS man, is it fair for you to sit up here and have to pursue someone that winds up settling for you because of what you made for yourself and because of what they've not been able to get going for themselves? Only to have them sit up and talk about or sit up and try to virtue signal by talking about what they don't show to everybody else. Then only to have them a few years later talk about how they're jealous of you because of the attention you get that they don't get. While your mother sits next to her and doesn't check her. Then later on to have your moms maybe, I say maybe because we don't know, but to have your moms maybe go live with another man. Because I'm going to tell you now, I know that this is a problem too. You see what I'm saying, gentlemen, is that you LS men are pretty much being told that you need to be doing all of these things. The LS women are not sitting up and saying Western training is a bad thing. This is the problem. It is, but they're not saying that Western training is a bad thing. Therefore, we need to shun that and go back to traditionalism. And the materialism is not guaranteed to be satisfied either. That's what is not being said. What is being said is what all you need to do and what all you owe and what all you're not doing and how it's your fault. But what is not being said is what they need to do and how they need to de-Westernize, psychologically speaking. Geographically, it's not their job to. You're born and raised in the West. You're born and raised there. It ain't your fault. But when you realize that Western training is what's ruining you and chasing them away from you, and you still say, I'm not going to de-Westernize, therein lies the problem. And the men have every right to turn around and say, okay, well, deuces. Because if what you want to form is this, we could go somewhere else and find an LS woman that's not Western, and we could start with them. Now, is that what you meant? No, that's not what you meant. Okay, well, you need to shuck up then. See, that's what I meant when I said that even some legitimate complaints, but definitely all the illegitimate complaints they have are used as weapons of war. So I don't say what I say out of hatred for any ladies of any shade, but the fact remains that the gender war is not exceptional when it comes to LS women and LS men. There aren't really any exceptions to it. What applies in general between Western men and Western women applies between LS men and LS women. We're gaslit. We're told to pursue with very little chance of success and requital. We are told to protect and provide as if it's owed, but nothing is owed to us in exchange, even if we sign a marriage contract. If she has a headache every single night or morning or whatever time of day is your favorite, so what? Deal with it. Don't complain. She then turns around and hands you every single bill that comes in the mail. Pay it. Don't complain. You're a man. The minute you go with somebody else, the minute you cheat, you no good dog. She does it, it's your fault because you weren't putting it down. And they got a lot of DS men brainwashed to believe this stuff. But a lot of DS men are not your problem either. Whereas these colorism arguments are largely going on between a section of DS women that are obsessed with this sort of thing and a section of LS women that are either obsessed with this sort of thing or are obsessed with their kids not going through it. And oftentimes they misuse terms like bullying, because bullying does not mean that you insult and you diss someone. Bullying means you either use violence or you threaten violence. Usually it is the use of the threat of violence in order to justify the use of some violence. I.e., I'm going to take this from you. If you resist, then I'm going to thrash you and beat you into the ground. That's bullying. If it's just insults, that's just dissing, and they misuse this term. You know that using the term bullying in its current definition is not something men started, because we would have never been allowed to do that. Look, DS or LS, but especially LS would not have been allowed this. When I was coming up in school, bullying meant that. It meant a threat of violence or the use of some violence with the threat of more violence. That's what it meant. But when it came down to just you insult someone, but you don't threaten violence and you don't utilize violence, that was just dissing someone. verbally picking on someone. That's what that was about. And so consequently, what I'm getting at is that they turn around and they've changed these things. I'm not talking about DS or LS women. I'm talking about girls in general, well, women in general. They changed that definition in the West. Then they turn around and they bully each other on social media and on Twitter and get each other into these uproars and then come to you and say, well, you all ain't. And the funny thing is, they're allowed to talk about childhood trauma. And what they call childhood bullying, which really means childhood dissing and insulting. But if they're traumatized or not, and they very well could be, I know, I think a lot of them are. But they're allowed to talk about their childhood traumas, and then you turn around and do that. You don't get a pass, especially if you are an LS man. See, Kwame Brown was allowed to write, and he was rightly allowed to talk about the bullying that he went through, and I mean actual bullying he went through, and dissing both when he was a child. And it is something to discuss so that we train our kids to stop doing this. Because one of the reasons they do it is because we sit back and say, well, it's okay because you're just a kid. We make that mistake a lot. Our own kid does it to someone, we let it slide because they're just kids. Someone else's kid does it to ours, we want that kid executed and their parents. We hypocrites when it comes to that in general, both genders, we like that. But see, when it comes down to it, let's be honest. LS men are not allowed, and this is a double standard. Now, we men can hash this out, and we will. We got some men that are sitting up and calling Kwame Brown out for this stuff while admitting to his right to take up for himself. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, at least we men can. So for the gender that is terrible at multitasking in most cases, we are very capable of picking out the justice and injustice in our assessments of Kwame Brown. He's right to fight back. Most of us really don't think it's okay to sit up here and insult Matt Barnes' masculinity or DJ Envy's masculinity and then tie that to their shade or their hair texture. We don't think so. And I'm not going to front. Brown and Beige Community, which is the name of the YouTuber I'm talking about, he rightly said, if that's the case, Kwame, then why didn't you translate that DS masculinity into basketball? You didn't translate that into your game. Now, granted, he started at 18. He started at a younger age than his professional colleagues and his peers. That is very true. The problem, though, is that if he was so masculine just because he's a DS man, he would have been able to translate that into a 22-year-old's game while at the age of 18, but he couldn't because he's human. That's why. He wasn't as bad as what people say. He just wasn't as good as his colleagues whose the average youngest age was 22. That's all that was. He did have a record that's better than what many of us have given him credit for. And I didn't even keep up with basketball. Still don't, but I could see that. The problem was, see, we as men, we can sit up and say, okay, this where you right, this where you wrong. DS women or LS women are not doing this. If they can or not is irrelevant. They're not doing this. And they're turning around and they're saying to you LS men, y'all gonna sit there and take that? Y'all gonna tolerate that? Tell them how about they fuck the shuck up because we're gonna handle this like adults. They're going to be handling theirs like children. And that's exactly what the hell they're doing, arguing over celebrities and representation in Hollywood. And we've got to actually deal with real life opportunities and family formation options to which they limit us based on arbitrary and dumb things like not only shade or hair texture, but also on height, which is beyond our control, income, which is halfway beyond our control, halfway within our control, things that have a lot more to do with luck than they do with effort. And when we judge them by things that are controllable and things they have a say-so over, we're making it easy on them and they come up short. If you don't believe me, look at Brittany Renner. Behaviorally speaking, she comes up short. And that's another thing I wanted you to understand. Why do I say that it's war? Well, Brittany Renner, even though colorism does not come into play in this thing between her and PJ Washington, Brittany Renner shows you that they're at war, period. It doesn't necessarily matter, DS or LS, they're at war with you, period. She shows you this because she said I gold dug and I am not ashamed and I don't feel guilty. She feels like what she did to PJ was perfectly okay. That's war, gentlemen. There's some really nasty, negative, trifling friends in her history. that put this in her mind. Those voices are still in her head. They are a part of who she is today. And she may not even be in contact with those same friends. And they've grown up and moved on from this or not. We don't know. Yet she does. See, she would feel shame if she had not done this. That's the thing. She is sitting up here and saying on video that she's at war. That's what she's sitting up and telling you. I love no man. I care nothing for any of them. It is about what they can give. I am for sale. I'm a piece of meat for sale. And even then, I'm going to get the F up and run as soon as I can get more money for running. Now, she might not have eligibility for alimony, but that $200K a month, hey, look, that's enough. She's going to sit back and never work again for another 18 years. Funny thing is, she'd had a better deal if she had stayed, because she could have let PJ, she could have stayed with him, let him train their baby boy in the NBA himself. And she could have let him put his son on the same path that Mr. Ball and Mr. Curry put their sons. And look at them. She would have come out better. But I think one of the things is that she also realized that had she put him on that path, once he hit success, all that was going to be available to them were going to be women like her. And that's one reason why I'm not sitting up here blasting PJ. Was that dumb? Should he have known? Yes, but I'm not blasting him largely because it's like LeVar said. When you get to that level of success in the NBA, ain't nothing but hoes coming through. That's all that's out there. That's the other thing. That's the other reason I'm not sitting up here pointing the finger at PJ. It's not really as though you have better options. That's what's out there. That's it. You're lucky if you don't get stuck with something like that. You see the disrespect with which Steph has had to put up coming from Ayesha. You see what PJ Washington had to go through because, see, she was going to his games. She was pursuing him. He didn't have to compromise time at work to go and pursue her. He didn't have to do what Simone Biles did in the middle of the Olympics to go back to the States and meet up with her and make sure she's not gobbling some other ding-a-lings and things. He didn't have to do all that stuff. She knew exactly what to do. Make this easy. And that's exactly what most Western women shun ever having to do, especially if they're anything nice to look at. And you're not rich and famous. Like, I ain't gonna make nothing easy. That's where they get this attitude from. The only thing they're doing is not making anything. They don't want anything to be easy on you because they think you deserve nothing but difficulty. And it's part of why it is they're in this war with you. They think you deserve it. So keep that in mind. I can't sit up here and tell you at all for 1 second that, you reach that level of success and you're that young and there's anything better out there for you. There isn't. There wasn't anything better out there for Kwame. There was not anything better out there for Matt Barnes. That's why she was getting with his friend Derek Fisher in his own house. It's the way they did it that for which Matt Barnes went over there to his own house and beat the brakes off his friend Derek. That's what that was about. And I think he should have done that, not because she liked Derek or Derek liked her, but because she was willing to do that behind his back. So was he, and in the house for which he still had to pay at that time. Like, man, shuck this fit. You ain't going to use my money and my property to get with her. That's exactly what was going on. There was no better option out there for Matt Barnes. That's all there was. You get to that level, there is nothing out there. Nothing good, at least. It's just not there. And honestly, the funny thing is, if you do get to that level, any of them that are any good, they're still going to sit up and say, yeah, well, see, my standards are still going to be over here. And the standards are going to include time. And that time is what you cannot afford to spend just trying to impress me because you have to stay up on your craft. So you're going to have, even the good ones are sitting up and saying, well, are you going to put this time into staying as good at your job as you are? Or are you going to put this time into trying to impress and woo me and court me and dazzle me and convince me? They demand a quantity of time that is automatically going to cut into someone's practice and performance. They won't accept any less time than that. And that's the other thing, gentlemen. I want to tell you all about these crap tests. And these crap tests, they come from DS women and LS women. It doesn't matter. If she ain't ugly, there's going to be a crap test. And I'm going to tell you the best way for us men to handle that is, first off, don't approach anyway. Don't validate, especially electronically. Stop this electronic validation. Don't do that. That's part of what's ruining the environment for everybody else. But the other thing too is that when you find that you're already in, let's say the marriage, because y'all know how I get down. Let's say you're in the marriage, or you're in the discussions for marriage, and she decides to crap test you. You sit up and you say, if I had done this, what would she do? That's how you go into the first discussion with any lady. If I did the same thing, what would she do? And you react accordingly when they do that. You go into the first discussion knowing that they may come up with a crap test. And you know ahead of time that what the right thing to do is when a crap test comes, you analyze that crap test. And you say, if I did this, how would she react? And you go in knowing that you need to react to whatever she does the same way she would react to you doing the same thing. Or better yet, you bounce, because maybe the way she would react would be to haul off and hit you or throw things at you, because that's how they get down. If that's what they would do, they turn around and do the same thing to you for which they would hit you if you did to them. Then you leave. You bounce. Cut them off right there. We're done. Get out the car. Okay, we're done. You know what? I'm leaving. Best of luck finding somebody. And, you leave out it. And if her dad, the Wali is like, wait a minute, y'all had like so many minutes and to answer these questions, y'all done early. Yep. Thank you, sir, for making this time. Best of luck to her. And if you're a gentleman like that, let's say that this is sit down as a Muslim, you're a gentleman like that and dad's probably going to ask, what the hell? And you just say, look, I know a crap test one. That's when you say, okay, if this advice will help her, then I'll tell you what's going on. There are things that we know they don't tolerate from us. All I ask is that I not have to tolerate that in exchange. If it's intolerable for me to do something, I don't tolerate it done to me. That's all it is. Ain't no big deal. If she doesn't do this to the next man, she has a very good chance with him. And you bounce. Now, see, at that point, that's what dad has to stop and think, okay, so my daughter, she feeling herself. She full of herself. Okay, I need to have a talk with her because she's going to run these men off. So what did you do? Yeah. Now, okay, and what would you have said if a man had turned around and said X, Y, and Z to you? Oh, doesn't seem the same, does it? Well, if you're going to be that stupid and one-sided, you're going to run off any man worth having. You're going to be living in my house till I'm dead. I don't know what you're going to do to take care of yourself after that. So you better tighten this up if you ever want to find somebody. Because I'm not letting you just have boyfriends and date and fornicate. See, that's the other thing. Oftentimes, these girl dads, we try to understand and like, well, if I was a dad, if I was a dad, I would be responsible and be fair. That's what we need to say. If I was a dad, I'd be willing to be responsible and be fair and looking out for her interests. If I was a dad, that does not mean I justify her stupidity because she cute. We got to sit up and say, we have to remember that when we look at some of these dads today and what they tolerate and what they let their little princesses get away with, it's just as wrong for us to let ours get away with when we're in the same position. But see, all of these things are conveniently overlooked or intentionally overlooked because they're at war with youth. And a lot of these illegitimate colorism complaints and some of the legitimate ones are nothing other than these weapons of war, as I pointed out. Thank you for listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout. Assalamu alaikum once again, and black heterosexual non-select male power just because she don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.